Folks, welcome back to Gaming Garbage, where we take a look at games, chat about the gaming news in the industry, and of course, stream for fun. Today we're doing a state of gaming. The AA is becoming the failing title, and I think this is something that is perpetuating regardless of what publisher, regardless of what developer. We've had a lot of failures in the last several years, roughly pretty much since 2021. And so that's 4 years of consistent either frustrations or not meeting expectations, all the way to just utter failures and hundreds of millions of dollars being lost. And the reason I'm showing, Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree is because this is a DLC that does more than the majority of these other AAA games that we've seen. And it does more than what the studios are doing, and it does more than what the publishers are allowing. And I'm going to be going over pretty much all of the reasons. This is going to be a deep dive into why I think AAA isn't meeting expectations and sometimes downright failing. So thanks for tuning in. I do these every once in a while. These are kind of more few and far between in between gaming news and playthroughs and some other stuff that we have on the channel. But hey, if you're interested, like, sub, all that jazz. But let's go ahead and get into this because, again, this is something I've been thinking about since even before the lockdowns. And it just really feels like it's starting to get worse. And it's becoming more of an issue as more people are starting to talk about it, and just we're even seeing it in the sales. People are just not buying these AAA games like they used to. So yeah, you're probably in your lower 20s, maybe all the way up to your 30s, and you probably feel like the gaming industry has just not just slipped, but literally altered itself. Like something has just kind of shifted in the gaming industry to where AAA is just not AAA anymore. It doesn't feel like AAA anymore. It feels like it's corporatized, commercialized, and even sometimes just a plain money grab, including with some of these reboots too. The IPs that we grew up with, we don't recognize anymore. The games don't bring joy like they used to. The excitement is gone, or not as intense as it used to be. And that's even for these newer releases, even for IPs where we really enjoyed, what they offered. And it's just like the newer stuff was just like, I like the older stuff better. And I'm right there with you guys. And so we're going to go over, again, how all of this AAA really just feels like a stranger, and what AAA is and why we feel like it's changed. And again, we used to be excited, but more people are getting excited for indie and AA now. And AAA is just kind of even becoming a bad word. Let's be honest, it's getting horrible. So let's talk about what AAA is and how I'm defining it for this video. There's many ideas out there, but I just want to define it here so we can all be on the same page. So personally, I generally look at budget and size of the game. And also the development cycle. I use all three of these to generally gauge if I believe it's an A, AA, or AAA game. And I think we need to include A now at this point, because there are definitely some games that feel and play like they're above indie, but they're not quite like AA quality yet. Or maybe they need a little bit more time to actually do that. And so technically Elden Ring and the Dark Souls games and Sekiro and Bloodborne, they're all seen as AA properties. But then AAAs are more like Mass Effect or like the Dragon Age games or Call of Duties now. Or like Suicide Squad. These are like bigger titles, and they definitely cost a heck of a lot more, much more money to actually build. So personally, I'm looking at the budget of the entire cost of the game. Again, the size, kind of the amount of content in there, how long does it take to beat it, and then also generally kind of like the gigabyte file size that we have on our hard drives. And then you have the development time. Most AAAs, they're over 5 years now, and some of them are even over 10, which is, that's really getting up there. That's getting crazy. Within 10 years, we're getting massive updates already, sometimes entirely new engines. In Unreal, we're having a change of generations. We're having refresh drops by then. And the industry's generally already shifted by that point of what's popular. So budgets normally for these AAA games are over $100 million. especially starting in the 2020s. And now that we've had inflation on top of that, it's just gotten worse. Again, these also have a pretty big file size. These are generally like well over 125 gigs in most cases, though that's probably fairly common, is that these are around 120, 140 gigs. And it's just ridiculous like how big these file sizes are. And even Elden Ring now with Shadow of the Erdtree DLC has finally topped at 100 gigabytes. But yeah, the base game was like, it completely fit on a disc, which was impressive. It was under, I think it was under 60 gigs, which is unbelievable. The dev cycle too, they generally take a pretty long time. And yeah, again, it's normally over 5 years. It's usually 6 or more. 6 to 10 is pretty common. And so what are some good examples of these good AAA games? Final Fantasy, Fable, Halo, Red Dead Redemption, GTA, Call of Duty, Diablo, God of War, Horizon, Last of Us, even Starfield would be considered a AAA, and was generally a pretty good example compared to what we've had lately. Same with Diablo and with Call of Duty. Also Fallout, Gran Turismo, Forza, Assassin's Creed. There are many of them out there. There's even a lot of them we don't even really see today that these publishers don't even do anything with. They just stick with what works until it's not going to work anymore. And then they're going to then try something else as the money kind of dries up. And that's generally how the industry runs today. In the 90s, each decade honestly seemed to push the technology, even across some of the names that I mentioned. Some of these started back in 2007 or like in 98. We're talking old games here. And they've definitely had some pushes in technology. I remember, even PlayStation 1 and Nintendo 64 being able to go to 3D. That was a huge deal. We've also seen, the big expanse of open world games. Instead of things being generally smaller. We've seen the expansion of DLCs, live service. We've seen arena shooters crop up. I mean, we've seen a lot of stuff, which is pretty amazing in just roughly the last 30 years. And so we loved the improved graphics, again, the changes in the game design, the new experiences that we had. And it was a really fun time, actually, until about the mid-2010s. We started noticing some changes with money taking over passion and consumers' first mentality disappearing. It was now more about the company. We still had some good games, but things were changing, and we had trends like DLCs, microtransactions, also known as MTX, free-to-play models taking over. That was more kind of 2000s, 2010s, and then also live service, which was more 2015 and onward, and really like microtransaction live service with 2015 onward. It wasn't necessarily a new concept, but now it was expanding into everything. While this used to be just to a few games on PC, it's now expanded onto every console, every type of genre, every major IP almost, and even just, taking over mobile. Everything is free to play live service now, and that's just what they've been doing for quite some time, and I really don't see it getting any better in most cases. Games were also getting bigger and more complex during this time period. Again, there was this development cycle of adding DLCs, changing the games, making them bigger, making them more live service, continuing to push that content to just have something that could make money forever. And the idea that we got to see, I think a good IP for an example of this was Destiny 1 was roughly 3 years. And then they're like, hey, let's push it for like over 5-6 years with Destiny 2. And that's exactly what they did. But now we've seen the result of that. Bungie has had massive layoffs. They've lost over 35% of their entire studio. A lot of people in the higher-ups have left. We've even had firings of like some of the studio heads and some of the directors. And it's been a pretty trying time for the studio. While in the meantime, just in 2023, Bungie lost 45% of their normal revenue growth. Because, again, I think people are, partly getting tired of just, again, more live service that is just more expensive every year, but also just the fact that consumers now have less money. And we'll also get into that, too. But yeah, as these games were getting bigger and more complex and adding more things, Again, it wasn't just gameplay, but it was more or less what they could actually sell you to keep you playing. As these companies continue to see more revenues coming in from their and also pushing against their competitors, more started jumping in to create more competition, again, more live service. And from 2015 to 2018, we had PUBG, Rainbow Six Siege, Fortnite, Roblox, Apex, Overwatch, and others that we've already forgotten or don't even remember. They've just disappeared in the everspace of digitization. Games on PC and console eventually expanded to mobile as well, as I already mentioned, and all of this just kept changing and shifting at the same time. Live service was growing and adapting and really trying to continue to just find ever creative ways to get your money. But yeah, this really got big. And again, every major IP is basically live service now in some way. We even added things like play early, playing 3 to 5 days early and paying extra money for that. We came up with like the Vault Edition or like the Black Cell Edition for like Call of Duty. They're now trying to get not just $70, which is, a $10 price increase is always nice, but now trying to get to $100 or even $110, like with Star Wars Outlaws or Assassin's Creed Shadows, which is wild. Even with a Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, I think the most expensive version of that is, again, $110, $120. They don't want $70 anymore. Again, I don't believe it's actually enough to make the company sustainable. And so with how they're built at this point, and so they're trying to find more ways to get more money, trying to bring you enough value so that you can let your money go. The issue with live service is that it hasn't always been successful. It's also been extremely damaging to a lot of companies, for example. But in many ways, too, they're trying to find ways just to engage players, and that's getting harder as more competition is coming onto the scene. And so this kind of live service bubble has kind of been pushing AAA publishers to keep competing with each other, trying to get the market share. But again, there's only so many people that really want to play arena shooters, that really want to play true live service, microtransaction to death games. And I think they're kind of tapped out on that. I think that's really what the money is starting to show. And if you've already invested in a title for a while, well, you're not just going to quit that and abandon everything you've ever worked for and spent on, which is probably thousands or tens of thousands in most cases for many people. You're not going to jump and just completely start over with something else. Again, the titles, the skins, all of the money you've chosen to spend, whether it was on a whim or kind of a tactical situation, or even some of the pay-to-win type of stuff that we've seen in some video games, again, you're going to stick with what you've been playing. And so it's extremely hard, basically after 2018, 2019, to really get into the market once the stimulus money from the lockdowns started drying up. And this is something that we need to address too. In 2020, of course, everything changed for the world. We had a lot of retirements. We had a ton of stimulus money. Just in the United States, we had over, I think it was around $9 trillion of direct stimulus money to taxpayers, which is crazy. My wife and I, of course, we got some, but we used it to pay debt off. But a lot of people chose to actually spend it. We also had, this really led to careless spending on top of that, but we also had supply chain issues. And so we had generally same supply, but more money that was careless spending, creating more demand. And so, yeah, the prices went crazy. And I'm sure we all enjoyed the inflation that followed after that. But we also had these retirements. In 2021 to 2023, we've seen tens of millions actually retire in the United States. Over 50 million have actually retired, which is huge. To give you an idea, we're sitting at about 330 million as a populace. And to have over 50 million retire in just roughly 3 years is crazy. And some even offices and bureaus estimate that it was over 75 million in these 3 years. So massive chunks of the economy are saying sayonara and taking their money with them and no longer contributing. And so this created a crazy influx of open positions, including in game development. And so they needed to be able to pay more money to just get somebody breathing in the door. which again is kind of frustrating and ridiculous. But again, a lot of these companies, they didn't have a choice because with people being able to stay home, other people, millions that have just no longer really looking for work, they had already given up already before the lockdowns. And now also just being able to not have to pay bills, all the forbearance programs. I mean, it's just insane. And so it was really hard to actually find workers. This is also partly why the wages honestly had to go up and the salaries had to go up because, again, there just wasn't enough people to actually do and run the jobs. So this was very taxing for many developers that were actually working and trying to get their projects done because they had too much to do, not enough staff to do it, and they were constantly working overtime all the time. We even found out too with like some games like Star Citizen and Callisto Protocol that crunch time was literally every mother hubbing day of the week just to grind and get it done and out the door to meet the release date, which is crazy. So yeah, retirements had a big impact on this because it also, with all of these people retiring, they had been in gaming already for 20, 30, some even 40 years. And when they retired, they took a lot of that experience with them. The new people coming in, or the people that had kind of been at the mid-tier jobs, were now elevated to top positions or even director positions within a studio. And now they were the ones in charge of, again, a whole bunch of other people that had normal salaries and were under them, no longer really knowing what they were doing compared to what the directors had. So there was this massive drain of experience that I feel no one really talks about because even though it did happen, no one really actually talks about this. Because again, if you have tens of millions of people retiring and you have a lot of that experience disappearing, you don't have the know-how or even the desire and passion or experience to draw from to actually create games that are interesting and innovative. And so you generally have kind of the same type of mentality, which in my opinion is why a lot of these AAA games generally kind of feel the same, which is kind of crazy. We also saw a bunch of loans. We saw a massive push of private capital being available more than ever. And so we also had new studios coming up that were creating new game projects because there was money available to actually produce it. And this exploded actually at a pretty crazy rate, starting with IPOs in 2021 and really got going in 2022 and even continuing to see it in 2023. And so a lot of these games, a lot of this came directly and in part, of course, with the stimulus, but there were extra programs that were made just to be able, hey, if you need help starting a company because we have massive unemployment or people that have retired, we need to keep the economy going in the United States or anywhere else. And so there were a lot of actual programs just to get companies started all over the world, especially in the United States, China, Russia, and the rest of Europe. And so it was kind of crazy to actually see this because while these countries are handing out grants and getting things started, there were even some that were specific to the type of, what's the word we could use? I'm not trying to be demeaning, but like the crowd that has a narrative or an agenda specifically that they wish to push, regardless of what side of the coin. But there was such an available amount of money, people could now take the time to put their ideas actually on paper or in digital form in a game and actually present them to people. And I think we have a few examples of this, like Dustborn and Lord of the Rings Gollum. Lord of the Rings Gollum got about $20 million, $25 million from the German government in order to actually make the game and produce the game themselves. Well, they weren't really great. They didn't have a ton of experience to actually make that type of a game, and it shows. The game was the worst rated game, I believe, in 2023. It is horrible. It was horrible. We also had Dustborn. That was this year, which kind of came and went. A few people talked about it. Not too many, but Dustborn was basically a game talking about from the more liberal side of the political and social class system in the Western world. And Dustborn, again, didn't sell very well, but again, they got millions to actually produce their game from France. I believe it was France. And again, that money just vaporized into nothing just like all of the money that went into creating Gollum. And there's more examples of this too. So it's like, even though games could be made, they weren't asked if they should be made, if there was actually an audience for these games, or if the studio was even capable of producing the game in the first place. And so again, we just have more bad games that are coming out there and chasing trends with the live service, and a lot of lack of experience as retirements have been happening, and then even grants to get things off the ground with some of these projects, to then get games like Lord of the Rings Gollum, Concord, Suicide Squad, and even Dustborn. It's just crazy. Oh, Skull and Bones was another one. That's a great example. We're looking at roughly $600 million in 13 years to basically start a new studio in Singapore. Again, not a lot of experience. And to create something that was the worst pirate game ever. Like, it didn't have any representation of this at all. It was just, it's so bad. And even with all of the betas, all of the delays for 2-3 years at a time, again, it didn't matter. The game was really not great. It was improved, but again, for $600 million, it's like, yeah, you're not going to be making your money back. The stimulus itself, let's talk about that. That was, again, tens of trillions of dollars in the United States. When you add all of the Western countries like Europe, North America, Australia, Japan, etc. Okay, when you add a lot of the first world countries, I'll put it that way, there was hundreds of trillions that were just given directly to taxpayers for even more than just a year. I know in the United States, we had 4 separate packages that were given, depending on kids, married, adult, taxpayer, business owner, I mean, whatever it was. There was different types of stimulus programs that we had, but it was so much money, it led to this careless spending. And then on top of this, we had these supply chain issues, because again, people weren't working, stuff couldn't ship, people didn't have to technically work, and so it was kind of a mess all around with all of this extra money and kind of nothing to buy. And so that's why these prices just went completely through the roof. We even saw cars grow in value for the first time ever. We've had cars for roughly about 125 years, and we've never seen the value of cars generally actually go up, even like a Toyota Corolla or a Toyota Prius. I mean, seriously, it is just ridiculous. I even saw my own car double in price. It's like, seriously, a used car of this is going to double in price? It's not worth that. But still, some people, hey, you got to do what you got to do. And other people, with having a lot of stimulus money, they were like, well, hey, let's go ahead and buy something. So we saw this with Camaro SSs. We saw this with Dodge Challengers and Chargers. We saw this even with Dodge Vipers that were almost triple in value now, because again, you could sell them for stuff. We saw this with Jeep Rubicons, and on goes the story of just basically every single car and truck going up in value. But yeah, there were huge revenues in gaming too that we'd also never seen before. People had time on their hands with being able to stay home, all of this money to spend it on something, and hey, I like video games. Of course, you're going to spend more on your hobbies. Why not? So we saw some of the most massive revenue growths ever reported by companies for roughly 2 years with all of this extra money, which was kind of insane. And so again, it's like, oh, people are willing to pay for more. Well, let me put it this way. People are willing to pay more money for less content. We also got to see the just actual price with 2K 2024. It was 2K 2023. We got to see that with, Take-Two Interactive. They were the first ones to actually make the $70 game. And now $70 is really standard now. And games that used to be $50 are now $60. So no matter what, just the cost has gone up. We've also seen the increase in services pricing, like Sony going from $60 to $80 for multiplayer, or Xbox going from $60 to $75 for multiplayer. We've also seen an increase in Game Pass a couple of times. And we've also seen an increase in PlayStation Plus and PlayStation Premium. Like, there have been many, many things that have actually increased over time, and it's kind of insane. It's honestly kind of insane on how much everything now costs. We even have a first refresh that is $700, which is wild. Um, we've also seen DLCs now that used to be maybe $20. Now they want $40. Yeah, it used to be just kind of a Destiny thing, but now that's just going around. And then microtransactions have gone all the way upwards of triple digits. Like, or $60 horse armor, like in Diablo. Are you serious? Are you kidding? Like, it's just insane, folks. We all know it. And controllers too. Don't even get me started on controllers. They've gotten expensive too. Hard drives, everything has gotten insane. And so game companies saw the money and they got hungry. And so we also started experimenting with blockchain, NFTs, crypto games, larger live services that maybe weren't supposed to be a 10-year plus idea, where now we're like, hey, look at all of the money coming in. Let's keep going. And it all became about players playing and revenues going up and keeping them spending. And again, this was kind of disgusting to see, because while some of us could see it, some of us just were like, well, I have the money. Why does it matter? So we saw people spending hundreds of thousands on Diablo 4 or on Diablo Immortals, or even something like Monopoly Go getting $2 billion in the first 10 months of revenue. A mobile game. Like, seriously, that is crazy. That is absolutely insane. There was a problem, though. By the end of 2022, we started to see these layoffs, and it all started with quality assurance, which no one really talked about quality assurance like, oh, that kind of sucks. But we didn't really think too much of it. Companies weren't seeing as much revenue, and so they had to start with somebody. And again, it wasn't necessarily everybody that was having this issue. Just some companies weren't getting as much revenue as before, and so they needed to make some changes. In 2023, we then had record layoffs across the board. Again, when quality assurance was over, they then focused on making sure that everybody that pretty much worked in art direction in some shape or form, then it also got laid off, unfortunately. and and then it just kept going from there. We're letting go all of these people because of redundancies. I think the company that's actually had the most layoffs to date is actually Microsoft, at least for their gaming division. Now, Microsoft has had a lot of other layoffs too, simply just in their AI department or Azure or programming, all of that kind of stuff. And we've also seen this push for AI, because again, if the companies can save money, they will. Oh, why not? They're a business. You and I would run our businesses exactly the same way. If we can save money, we can. We also got to see studio closures. We had a lot of those in 23. We got to see canceled games. Embracer canceled 29. 29 games were canceled by Embracer Group, which is crazy, which is one of the biggest publishers out there in video games. We also see a lot of delays. And then we also got a bunch of bad games. Games that were frustrating. Didn't feel complete, didn't feel finished, buggy, servers didn't work. It's basically worthless to pay for, an extra 3 or 5 days early, because again, the servers were so messed up. But yeah, eventually these games honestly had to come out. And here we are in 2024. So 2023, we kind of laughed at it. Okay, it's got to get better, right? Starting in October, September in 2022, we had layoffs. We had a whole bunch of layoffs in 23. Well, 24 has already well beyond broken the record of layoffs that 23 ever had. And 24 is becoming a monster. But 2024, it's honestly been different. AA's and indies were actually doing better in revenue than ever before. AAA's were starting to have a lot less revenue, having hundreds of thousands of losses. Hundreds of millions in losses. Regardless of even some of the most trusted companies like Rocksteady that made the Batman Arkham games, they came out with Suicide Squad, even after being delayed for like 9 months. It was still a piece of trash. And again, the total design of the game, the art direction, it just was not hitting with anybody, and people didn't want to waste their time and money actually playing it. There's one thing to have a bad game that doesn't really sell, but I definitely think it's a whole nother thing for your game to just be forgotten. Because then there's no hope. You can't even fix it at that point. And I feel like Suicide Squad was a really good example of that. I saw a few people play it at launch during that first week, even coming back to see Season 1, and that's basically it. I didn't see anybody else after that. But yeah, players, they're starting to feel the pinch too. And we still are, honestly, and we will continue probably in 2025. Because we're looking for a value proposition now in video games. And this is why AA and indies are honestly making a good chunk of money. They're actually doing better than AAA studios and publishers, which is kind of backwards. But we got a report off of Steam saying that AA's and AAA's honestly made almost exactly as much revenue as all of the AA's did. Of all of the AAA's. So that's crazy. We have kind of lower quality games getting as much revenue in as AAA. And that had never happened before. That hopefully doesn't happen again, because then it just shows like how bad the AAA space is. But we've also had a ton of failures that we weren't expecting. And now we just expect AAA to suck. I mean, honestly, I'm right there with you. Between all of the games that we already had last year, it's like, and all of the ones that were doing well and now weren't, it's like, well, AAA isn't really going that great. And we even had a few every once in a while, even going back to 2020. But yeah, by the time we got to 21, like Halo Infinite, for example, it did not hit right. They didn't make as much money as they could have, but they've still been successful because it's still running. But it's been such a mess. They're now changing their engine. They're not going to use the Slipspace engine anymore to design their games. They're now basically going to reboot with Unreal Engine 5, starting with 5.5. And this actually, too, will be pretty interesting to see what that looks like. We've also seen a change, too, in the industry. I feel like I need to mention this, even though it's not on here, is that a lot of publishers and or platforms are saying, look, we're going to bring our first-party titles to more platforms. And so if you're on PC, you're eating really good. The only one that is still sticking to itself is basically Nintendo. But Xbox and PlayStation, they're bringing generally everything that they have to bear in most cases over to PC and to Steam and the Epic Store. And then also Xbox is bringing a lot of first-party stuff now over to PlayStation. PlayStation is still holding out. Every once in a while, we still might actually get a game, or we still have these timed exclusives by other third-party developers. But even the third-party publishers and developers are saying, look, we actually need to do more in getting more revenue through the door. So guess what, Sony? We don't want to do these timed exclusives anymore. We actually want to launch the entire game for everybody that we can, all in one go. And we're starting to see that especially with Square Enix. Even Sega and Capcom are starting to do the same thing. Again, not with everything. Like Silent Hill 2 was a good example of this. We're going to be getting Silent Hill 2 12 months after initial release on Xbox. We're also going to get Black Myth Wukong at some point, probably next year sometime, which is roughly going to be probably maybe 9 to 12 months after initial release on PlayStation. So the tune is changing. The companies are showing stress and showing to continued stress, and they have to keep making these changes and adaptations to, again, stay as they are. Otherwise, we're going to have more layoffs coming, which I ultimately think is going to continue to happen anyway through pretty much all of 2025. We'll see if I'm right. I hope I'm not, because, this is getting awful. So, as these players are starting to find these value propositions in games like Black Myth Wukong, Hogwarts Legacy, or Elden Ring, or Baldur's Gate 3, again, these are not necessarily, huge games or big AAA games. They're in the AA space, and their budgets are definitely a lot smaller, but they're making tons of money. Even Pal World that launched this year, and Helldivers 2. These were kind of more either early access or a live service type of game, but they were built in such a way where they put the player first. And this is what players like you and I are looking for in most cases. We're wanting something that's going to be worth our money. Elden Ring certainly was. I have 531 hours in my first playthrough of Elden Ring playing with Lion Chaser, and it's been a blast. We just finished the DLC, and it's been so incredibly fun to just enjoy the game and have the value there of just hundreds of hours of play. And yeah, I'm going to go back and play it again because I've had such a fun time actually doing it. Got to get through some other stuff first, but I will be coming back probably in 2 or 3 years and play Elden Ring again. But players are already seeing, honestly, less features in games too. It's not just that they cost more, it's not that companies are asking for more. We're seeing kind of a more breaking up in microtransaction marketing or modeling, if you will, in these live services. It's almost like, okay, you got the car in its entirety, but you can also have these bodies too with different colors on it that you can swap in and out. Okay, that sounds great. And now we've gotten to a point where it's like, you got to buy the wheels, you got to buy the tires, you got to buy some type of a tool in order to get the wheel and tires together, and another tool to actually get them on the car. You need to, get pay for another microtransaction tool to get the engine in and put the windows and seats in. I mean, do you get what I'm saying? Like, everything is so microtransaction to death in some cases, it really feels like it's getting out of hand, and it doesn't feel like that value proposition. And so more players are starting to say no. Even though Black Ops 6 has massive hype, there's still not as many players playing compared to Modern Warfare 2, which was just a couple of years ago. Now, Modern Warfare 3 is not hard to beat. That was a really bad game. But I would even say that Black Ops 2 is not, unless we see some actual numbers, it's still not doing as many players as we would think it would. Now, most players on Black Ops 6 are on PlayStation. The next set is on Xbox, and the lowest amount looks like it's on PC. But again, we don't have any actual numbers yet. We do know it was the biggest launch, most multiplayer matches made, and hours played of any Call of Duty game, basically, at launch. So we know that Black Ops 6 is doing very well, but I still think there's something kind of off there because I'm wanting to see some actual numbers because, again, this is a AAA experience for 12 months, and it just sounds expensive. So some people are probably trying it through Game Pass, myself included. But again, if I paid $70 for Black Ops 6, I would be pretty frustrated because that's too much money for the amount of stuff I'm actually expecting. We've also seen, again, MTX costing more. Even sometimes more than the game itself, which is ridiculous. We've seen now 2 tiers instead of 1 for not Game Pass, for like season passes or battle passes. We've also seen added subscriptions like on Siege. Just seriously? That's ridiculous. We've also seen this on Minecraft. And now we're charging for a game plus the microtransactions, plus the season pass, plus it's getting to a point where there's so much of it. Again, it feels like that car broken up into all of the pieces as the microtransactions, and you have to buy all of them together to actually get a valuable experience. But again, who wants to pay hundreds or thousands of dollars by the time you're done? Oh, let me say this, for a full experience, Star Citizen, holy frick, man, if you don't have $100,000, don't even start. The game is so incredibly expensive. I was curious, though. We've had live service for roughly 10 years now. Again, the first really big one that we got to see was Rainbow Six Siege. And the last live service game to actually win Game of the Year was Overwatch 1 in 2016, just the year after. And Overwatch 1 had a huge following. Overwatch 2? Not so much. It's been pretty brutal. And as live service isn't doing well for most publishers, neither are many of the newer studios, or even some of the older ones, with one-sided narratives. Again, so maybe live service isn't doing great, but maybe the rest of it is, and no, that's not the case either. We're starting to see more story-driven games that aren't as successful, aren't doing well, like Assassin's Creed Shadows had to be delayed because of stuffs. We also had Star Wars Outlaws. We also had the reboot of Saints Row, which totally didn't even feel like a Saints Row game. It even shut down the studio. We also had Red Fail. We also had Forspoken. And these are games that's just like, what are they here for? They're either so broken or the story isn't going anywhere. It's so bland, or the messaging is so one-sided. It's just not. It's just not worth $60, $70. Again, it's a problem. It's a problem, and so they're starting to turn more to remasters. Again, we've had remasters. There's quite a few every single year if you actually go and look it up. But generally speaking, there have been more remasters of main IPs than like ever before. We have seen such an increase. And I even took time to do the math on this. And we've seen about 30 to 40% increase in remasters depending on the year for the last couple of years. And a lot of them we don't hear about, right, because we're not interested. But again, it's like we're rebooting Call of Duty. We're going back and going to be doing Horizons. We did Silent Hill 2. We did the Dead Space remake. We're now putting them into collections. We hear that there's going to be a God of War remaster collection now of the original God of War 1, 2, and 3, which would be wonderful, by the way, but I think they're going to alter those because they are borderline rated A. But this is also becoming a problem because while remasters are fun, remasters are not enough to actually sustain a company. So here we have some companies and publishers that have pushed so hard on live service and are also now having to do remasters because the story-driven stuff isn't selling and the live service is lacking. Well, the remasters are kind of filling in a hole behind a massive flood that's coming that's going to sink the company. So they have to think of something. And I believe that companies either have to change what they're doing or, yes, they will ultimately fail. And I think several that are in the crosshairs right now is Ubisoft, though no, not as bad as some might think. EA's doing extremely well, so I think they don't have to worry about it. But another one would be Square Enix. Again, they don't have amazing bangers. Again, they still sell millions of copies for like Final Fantasy or even for some of their other games. But when we hear that like Spider-Man 2 needs to sell 10 million copies to basically finally make money, that sounds insane. Or like Alan Wake is going to have to sell, again, over 5 million copies to be profitable. And they're expecting to be profitable by next year. That's wild. The budgets are over-bloated. They are so full of waste. It's ridiculous. And then they're not even great. On top of that, again, AAA, they're supposed to be great, and that's just not happening. So again, just more remasters, baby. We even have more remasters coming for next year. Now, some of them I'm actually excited about. And Embracer really seems to be taking this and accepting this as hard as it can because they're doing a ton of them. Even just this year, Aspyr has released 8, or will. Excuse me, I should say it that way. Aspyr will actually release and publish 8 remasters by the end of the year. 8 games, or no, I forgot one. 9. Excuse me. 9 by the end of the year is pretty insane. I've never heard of that before. And it feels like some of these studios are supporting studios. While some have gone independent, ones that are left are basically just like, well, we're just doing remasters now because we need to get money in the door. And again, they're not the only ones. Xbox has done some. Sony has done some. And then we see also these deep discounts for a lot of games. And I guess that's something to actually bring up too as a rabbit trail. It's pretty common at this point for a lot of AAA stuff to actually be discounted within 2 to 3 months. And that's bad. Because if you're already playing something else or you're busy with life, having to work and all that jazz, why would you go out and buy a game that you can't play yet that you know you can get a copy of because everything's digital now. Why not just wait until the price to actually go down and then go out and buy the game for $60, $50, $40, $30? Welcome to my MMO. Welcome to my MO. That's basically what I'm doing. I'm waiting just for the price to go down, and I'm buying it when I'm actually kind of able to play it. Unless I want to buy a physical copy, then yeah, I'm shoving the money out, and that is expensive, but I am actually getting a physical copy for what it's worth. But yeah, that's something too that I also didn't have written down here. Again, folks, this is going to be in-depth as I can honestly make it. So yeah, with all of these problems, all of the closures, the layoffs, the focus of live service, just trying to sell as anything that they can with that model, pushing the remasters, trying to figure out what else they can do, what else they can push, all the delays we've been having. Well, we have a list of failed AAA, basically, or those that at least didn't meet expectations in 2023. We had Skylines, Redfall, Forspoken, Modern Warfare 3, Atomic Heart, Blood Bowl. Blood Bowl 3, Destiny 2, Overwatch 2, Lord of the Rings Gollum. Man. Again, it was not an extremely expensive game to actually make. It cost them several tens of millions. But again, it had such a big name behind it. It was just a massive loss for them. To the point where they will never develop again. They will publish only. We also had Payday 3. That was another bad one. And some of these are still running, of course. Some of these have improved and gotten better, but they didn't sell well, and it honestly hurt the publisher and the studio and even some of their reputations. And some of these studios, they don't even exist anymore. Like Arcane that made Redfall, they're done. They're never coming back. List of AAA games for 2024. So far, we've had Suicide Squad, Skull and Bones, Star Wars Outlaws, Concord, oh my gosh, and then also delayed Assassin's Creed Shadows, which isn't likely to meet sales expectations either next year on Valentine's Day. We also had Alone in the Dark. Again, that was another pretty big title, fairly expensive, but again, it just kind of came and went. It wasn't great. And a lot of these remasters, it's kind of the same thing. It's like, that's too much money. Again, these players are looking for a value proposition just like myself. It's expensive playing video games. So the most successful games, they've mostly been AA. They've also been the ones winning the games of the year, which is surprising. But like Baldur's Gate 3, that was 2023. Elden Ring, that was 2022 Game of the Year. What's going to be 2024? I don't know. In my opinion, it should either be Black Myth Wukong, Space Marine 2, or Helldivers 2. And again, those are AA games. Again, they're not AAA. Should it be Star Wars Outlaws? No. Absolutely not. Should it be Concord? No, it can't be because it doesn't even exist anymore. What about Suicide Squad? They lost over $200 million. Sony isn't putting out anything else, so what about Xbox? Well, they got Indiana Jones. Shattered Space? Not great. Big disappointment for a lot of people. Especially for $35. That was expensive BS, in my opinion. I don't even want to buy it now. I've been looking for a physical copy, but I'm going to wait, baby. It's going to get cheap. But yeah, a lot of these games, they're not even able to be considered at this point for Game of the Year because they've been so horrible. And it's shocking. It's shocking that this is the state of gaming. That this is where the gaming industry is. It's pretty insane that we're actually living this. And it's horrible to pay attention to. It's bad news all the time on YouTube channels. I understand. And I get angry sometimes. I got to quit because it's such a mess. It's such a disappointment. AAA, again, it's become a failed title. It's become a bad word. Most people, yeah, I've even had some of my buddies, they're like, I don't want to buy a AAA anymore. I just want to buy indie and AA. Or others have said, I've seen in comments, AA is the best. You're going to have paying less money for relatively the same amount of gameplay, smaller file size, less microtransaction or none at all. And it's actually a full game that runs. It isn't buggy to death. So looking at the list of 2023 and 2024, there's some big games on there and studios that are attached to that list, but their reputations have been damaged. And again, some of those others, they're gone, like Luminous Studios too, that made Forspoken. Sayonara, baby. They don't even exist anymore either. And so some of the big publishers, they've also lost billions by now. Oh, they've lost billions. And it's not funny, but like it is just so surreal to think about that. And it's because their games have failed or their games didn't meet expectations. But so far, this has been Sony, Xbox, Embracer, Square Enix, Sega, Ubisoft. Putting all these together, they've lost over $10 billion to date. Just in the last couple of years. Because again, these games took years or even almost 10 to actually make. And they're not making any money. That's a problem. That's a problem. That's why 2024 layoffs so far have absolutely blown 2023's record-breaking numbers out of the water. We're having way more layoffs. They don't even keep up with it anymore. That's horrifying. That's scary. We can't even keep up with how many studios are being closed. I'm finding new ones all the way several months back, and I try to keep up with this for, quote, a YouTube job. And I can't even find them all. It's a scary time to be a developer right now, because if your game bombs in the first week, are you even going to have a job? We've even had some games like Ninu something. For those in the comments, leave it down below for me, because again, I don't play a ton of animes or Japanese games. But the day the game launched this year, which was literally just last year in October, the day the game launched, they just closed the studio. Same day. I mean, they didn't even wait for the game to have sales. It's just crazy out there. It's also been weird for release dates. We got to talk about that too. And continued delays. The delays, in most cases, are not helping. 2025 looks pretty empty. You can look it up yourself on Wikipedia. Generally, they're fairly accurate. They update it pretty much several times every week. But there's nothing past April. I wish I was kidding. There's really nothing past April. And then you should see the list of dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of titles that don't have a release date. Not even a quarter. It's like, oh, this might actually come out within this 6-month period. Or it's just going to come out sometime this year. Until they delay it. Now it's going to be 2026. And that's what I think we should expect, folks. Games that are supposed to be coming 25, expect them to be delayed for 26. That's what happened from 22 to 23 and 23 to 24. And I think and again, we've even had that with 24, now stuff going to 25. I mean, if that's the trend, why expect anything else? Are we even going to get GTA 6 in 25? It might be 26. I think we should expect that. And some people are saying, oh yeah, we'll get it at the end of 24. I told them, man, no way. You're out of your mind. It's way too big of a game. And they're having issues because there's some stuff going on over there that doesn't necessarily sound too good. Well, then it was spring of 25. Nope. Now it's fall, technically, of 25. So we have basically 12 months to wait. But is it going to come out in fall? Yeah, again, it might be 26. We'll have to see. We're also supposed to have Marathon from Bungie. Again, they've been talking about this game for like over 2 years. We even got an update, which they didn't even show us any gameplay, like they said they would. And what did we get? Stealth and Ghost or wispy, the cloud and whatever. I mean, it kind of looks cool for what it is, but again, we're not really seeing much about the game. And this is kind of concerning because Bungie isn't focused on Destiny anymore, really. They're still going to continue to provide content. Yes, that's not what I mean. What I mean is that the bulk of Bungie is now working on Marathon and has been. There's now basically a skeleton team for Destiny and the majority working on Marathon, and we still don't have any gameplay at all. That's kind of scary. I don't think Marathon's going to be successful. I don't see how it can be when we had Concord and they want Marathon to still be $40. That's seriously? It's going to leave a bad taste in people's mouth unless it's like Helldivers. It ain't going to work. I'm really beginning to believe that the whole reason we've had this push, the whole reason we've had all of these all this stuff happening roughly in the last 5 or 6 years is because I think AAA publishers, they can't sustain themselves on story-driven games. They have built themselves up to make live service, to live off of microtransactions, and so that's actually what they need. Because again, it produces more money. We've heard that forever. But story-driven games don't. And I think that's why Embracer is like, crank out as many remasters as you can. We got to make money. But yeah, I think it's another problem. And it's incredibly frustrating. It's a real mess. It's not just like things will just stay the same. Like things will either continue to get worse or they're going to see the light and will have to change things. Because if they continue to get worse, we might actually have a big gaming crash like in the 70s. That would be kind of scary. And then who's going to pull us out? Nintendo maybe, just like last time with the NES. But Nintendo would really have to come out with something amazing. Well, they don't focus on amazing consoles necessarily. They focus on affordable consoles, but maybe that's actually what needs to happen. Affordable gaming again. That's an interesting thought. Because if we really think about it, all of the things that we've basically shoved into gaming now, it's hundreds a year. Even just not even really buying the games. It's getting pretty expensive no matter which way you look at it. So yeah, we'll have to see with what these AAAs do. We also need to mention that just on the smallest console platform, which is Xbox, there are roughly 500 plus games that were released in 2023 for the Xbox. And this includes basically A to AAA titles per year. And this doesn't include indies. There's actually an archive list. You can pick your platform, pick your year, and it lists in alphabetical order or through filters every game that was ever made for that particular year. And it's pretty eye-opening because now we have all of these games that are jiving for your money. And it's pretty crazy. If we add all of the consoles, we're looking at several thousand a year of games that are being made, first and third-party games for all of these platforms. If we add PC, there's thousands more. Full releases, early access, remakes, collections. And then if we add mobile and Netflix and YouTube, etc., it's an insane number of companies trying to get your money. And so it's fierce competition out there. In fact, I'd say that it's so fierce that AAA is having trouble having enough money. So they're trying to find these bangers or trying to find these live service games that people will pay for on a continual basis, basically like a subscription with every season, again, to just be sustainable. But again, when we're no longer focused on spending all the money that we have in our stimulus check, well, of course, those checks don't exist anymore. Just in the United States, from 2020 to now, we've experienced about 24% inflation. So what used to cost $100 in 2020 now costs $124 in 2024. Pretty fitting, honestly. But it's getting too expensive. And so people that still want to have fun are looking for value propositions. This is why Tubi is exploding in viewership, because it's free, right? And they have millions more viewers a month than Disney Plus does, than Netflix does. Well, sometimes, depending on what Netflix has. But think about that. That's pretty wild. But we're also seeing just companies that are crashing, more layoffs. And again, I don't think this is going to improve or get better. I think this is going to continue until companies really start focusing on players again. And when they can do that, we'll start handing over our money, because we'll go get a job to continue to pay for fun experiences, to be able to pay for really good games. Most of us, Baldur's Gate 3, Elden Ring, or Black Myth Wukong, or Space Marine 2, or even Helldivers, we would probably get a side gig going just to be able to play those games. But yeah, what's AAA going to do? Because honestly, if things don't change, I think we are headed for a crash. As of now, no, I don't think we're headed for a crash. But if things continue through 25, even into 26, I think we have a serious problem. So thanks for tuning in, folks. If you enjoy the States of Gaming, again, I don't have these every single time. They don't come out as often, but if you're patient, they will show up, because I'm constantly thinking about this stuff all the time. I can't get it out of my head, so I might as well share it with y'all. And if you enjoy the content, like, sub, all that jazz, again, you can always follow me at GamingGarbage22 over at YouTube. Don't also forget Discord, Twitter, X, and also Twitch. Twitch, you can see it there first, if you wish. But yeah, hopefully you guys are doing well. Something, too, I want you guys to think about this. Your time is honestly an investment. And so if you don't feel like you have purpose, if you don't feel like what you're doing really matters or feels empty, maybe it's time to invest your time and money somewhere else. Again, I'm not saying all of it, but try something different. I did. I have a YouTube channel. I talk to you guys, and I have a fun time doing it. And I enjoy doing this. Sharing the information, interacting with you guys, seeing you guys on the live stream sometime, playing with some of you guys like we have at our past COD events, making new friends. It's been a good time. So yeah, maybe try something else. Make what you do worthwhile and valuable, not just to yourself, but to somebody else. So with that, folks, I'll see you guys on the next one.